I'm Avery, 37 years old. I was raised by my mother, a strong single woman, after my father passed away in a car accident when I was in first grade. We lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Indianapolis, and money was always a constant concern. Still, I never lacked love or proper guidance. My mom worked two jobs to provide for my education, and she always told me, "You have to stand on your own 2 feet, never let anyone decide your worth." I grew up in an environment where every penny had to be carefully accounted for. Frugality, ambition, and a fear of dependence were instilled in me early on. Right after graduating college, I made it my goal to build a solid career. I worked tirelessly, slowly climbing my way up the ladder at an international tech corporation headquartered in Chicago. By the time I was 35, I was the chief strategy officer of the North American division. My annual salary at that point was around $950,000, not including bonuses and stock options. But no one in my family knew that, and most notably, my husband didn't either. I met Lucas at an art event hosted by a mutual friend. He was 5 years older than me, from a wealthy family in Connecticut. He stood out with his calm demeanor, old-fashioned charm, and the way he spoke, like he was always reciting poetry. Lucas worked in real estate investment, and I used to think I was lucky to meet someone so accomplished and gentle. From the very beginning of our relationship, Lucas always assumed I was the kind of agreeable woman, meaning he thought I would be happy to take a back seat, give up my career, and dedicate myself fully to our home after marriage. Honestly, I didn't blame him. He was raised in an environment where the ideal wife was soft-spoken, stayed home to cook, and never prioritized her career over the family. But I was different. I kept working after we got married, even though Lucas wasn't thrilled about it. I told him I just wanted to work a few more years to build a bit of savings, and then I'd be ready to have children and focus on the household like he wished. That was just an excuse. The truth was, I never intended to stop working. I didn't lie, I just chose not to reveal the full extent of my income. In Lucas's eyes, I was just a mid-level manager earning a little over $100,000 a year, and he was perfectly content with that. We lived in a house owned by Lucas's family in a posh suburb north of Boston. Lucas paid for all our living expenses, the mortgage, the cars, while I quietly funneled my entire salary into a separate account. I still went to work every day, still cleaned the house, still showed up to family gatherings as the well-behaved wife. But the truth was, I never really felt like myself. There were nights I came home late from tense meetings, while Lucas lounged on the sofa, whiskey in hand, half joking, "So, are you aiming to be a CEO, or still clinging to that little title of yours?" I'd just smile and let it go. I didn't want to argue, nor did I want to bruise his fragile ego. I thought I could keep living in that pretend peace, but I was wrong. Because the day Lucas decided to leave me for a much younger woman, someone easily 10 years my junior, was also the day all the truth came out. And from that moment on, his world started to spiral. I used to believe that with enough effort and sacrifice, any marriage could be saved. But my marriage to Lucas didn't follow any formula I had ever known. We'd been married for over 3 years, and not once had he washed a dish. I'm not exaggerating. No matter how busy I was or how late I came home, I still had to cook, clean, do the laundry, even change light bulbs. Lucas lived like a guest in our home. He came home from work, flopped on the couch, drank, while I ran around like a maid with a college degree. I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted him to see that I got tired too, that I also needed rest, and most of all, I needed a partner, not a mental burden. But the longer we lived together, the more I felt like furniture, quietly existing, unnoticed. I thought, maybe things will change if we have a child. So one night after dinner, I gently brought it up. "I think it's time we start thinking about having a baby." Lucas looked at me like I'd just said something absurd. "A baby? Now? You're already worn out from work, constantly on the move. Are you sure you want to add a baby to that chaos?" "I know it'll be hard, but I'm willing to adjust. I want to be a mother, Lucas." He set his glass down, leaned back, and let out a dry laugh. "Avery, listen. You grew up poor, so maybe you think having lots of kids equals happiness. But I'm different. I don't want my life disrupted by crying diapers or sleepless nights." I froze. I'm not some naive little girl. I know having kids is a responsibility, but you're talking like poor people don't deserve to be parents. Lucas shrugged, his expression laced with contempt. That's not what I meant. But, you've gotten used to sacrificing. Me, I want a peaceful, uncomplicated life. If you want to be a single mom, go ahead. Just don't drag me into it. I've already handled the financial part. I stayed silent. In that moment, it felt like I had just been stabbed straight through the chest. The man I once loved, once trusted, was now casually dismissing every responsibility, every bond, just because I dared to dream of becoming a mother. From that day on, I never brought up the topic of children again, but the cracks in our relationship had already begun to rot from within. Lucas stopped calling me when I was away on business trips. The morning hugs disappeared. In their place was a growing distance between two people who once called each other life partners. I kept going to work, still maintaining a composed exterior, but inside I was numb to the core. He still came and went as usual, but I knew something had shifted. One evening, I happened to see a message from a woman named Haley on his phone. Nothing long, just a few words. "I missed you last night. Don't forget Saturday, room 302. I didn't ask. I didn't scream. I didn't need confirmation. That message was the perfect confession. What made it more bitter than betrayal was his indifference. Lucas didn't even bother to hide it. In his mind, I was just a piece of the past, no longer worth acknowledging. A few weeks later, while I was preparing for an international conference in Vancouver, Lucas unexpectedly called. "We need to talk. Seriously." I froze. That phrase usually signaled a storm coming. That night, when I walked into the house, the living room lights were still on. Lucas was sitting there, face cold as glass. "I met with a lawyer. I think we should get a divorce." I looked at him, trying to stay calm. "Why?" Lucas shrugged, emotionless. "We're just not compatible. You're too career-obsessed. I need a more traditional wife, someone who understands me better." I gave a faint smile, the kind of smile that comes from someone too exhausted to be surprised anymore. Lucas stood up and tossed a stack of papers onto the table. "I already prepared the divorce papers. You just need to sign here and we'll end things peacefully. Oh, and don't even think about property division. I'm not letting you take a single penny." I didn't sign. I didn't get angry either. I just said one thing. "You'll regret this." And he did. He didn't know a storm was coming, one he couldn't even begin to imagine, and this time, I was the one at the helm. I left the house the next morning with a strained smile and a compact suitcase packed with documents for the conference in San Francisco. It was a 4-day trip, and I intended to use that time to think carefully about everything Lucas had said. Divorce? Maybe it was for the best. But what held me back wasn't love. It was the feeling that I had given so much, only to be discarded like something past its expiration date. On the last day of the trip, when I got out of the car from the airport and returned home, I immediately noticed something strange. The lock had been changed. I tried 3 times. I still remembered the code perfectly, but the door coldly denied me access. I called Lucas, and for the first time in months, he actually picked up right away. "Avery, you're back? Good. We need to talk." I frowned, my voice tightening. "Why can't I get into the house?" Lucas replied nonchalantly. "I changed the locks, just so you know. I've filed the divorce papers and transferred the house into my name. Oh, and by the way, Haley and I registered our marriage yesterday." I stood frozen in the wind, my heart feeling like it had just been crushed. "You registered your marriage? We're not even divorced yet." "The divorce paperwork's been filed. I have your signature. It's all legal." I could barely breathe. "That signature's fake. I never signed anything." Lucas chuckled, cold as ice. Who's going to believe you? You're not even in the legal field. I have a witness. Now sign this document to give up your property rights, and let's call it a clean break. I hung up, my hand trembling with rage. I had braced myself for a battle, but I never expected Lucas to forge my signature and get married illegally while he was still my legal husband. I pulled out my phone and immediately called my personal attorney, someone I had trusted and consulted with in past corporate mergers. But this time, I wasn't calling as an executive. I was a betrayed wife, caught in a marriage laced with lies and deceit. That evening, I checked into a hotel near downtown Boston. My attorney, Ingrid McAllister, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, looked at me and said, calmly, "Your husband tricked you, forged legal documents, and now he's trying to strip away your property rights? This isn't just divorce, Avery. This is criminal." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I needed clarity. The more I was insulted, the more determined I became to fight back and win. We moved quickly. After an initial investigation, we discovered Lucas had used an old scanned version of my signature, taken from a car purchase agreement, and attached it to the divorce papers. The witness? A close friend of his, who also happened to be Haley's private attorney. It was a setup from the start. That night, I received another blow. Lucas had posted a wedding photo on social media, he in a tuxedo, Haley in a white gown, both standing beneath warm lights with a caption, "Officially starting a new chapter." The photo had been posted on the same day I was delivering a keynote to 300 global executives at a conference. He had planned everything. Waited until I was away, staged a fake wedding, submitted forged divorce documents, all to get rid of me like I was nothing more than a forgotten name on a page. I took a slow sip of hot tea, eyes still fixed on the screen. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. What I felt was utter contempt. But what Lucas didn't realize was I was never as weak as he thought. 2 days later, I had a formal legal notice delivered to Lucas, accusing him of document forgery, intentionally concealing his marital status to remarry illegally, and demanding the freezing of all personal assets. Not long after, he texted me, "You're going too far, Avery. We can settle this quietly." I replied with just 3 words. "Meet me now." He agreed. We met at a small cafe in the heart of the city. Lucas walked in with his usual false confidence, but the moment he sat down, I slid a thick file across the table. "This is proof that you forged the divorce documents, registered an illegal marriage, and transferred property unlawfully. Got anything to say?" Sweat formed on his brow and panic flashed in his eyes. "Avery, you're blowing this out of proportion. I just wanted to end things quickly." I didn't let him finish. "You chose to betray me in the most cowardly way. Now I'll make sure you understand what consequences feel like." I walked out of that cafe with one final sentence. "Congratulations on the wedding, Lucas. Too bad you're still legally my husband, and soon you'll learn money can't buy integrity." When I stepped out of that cafe, I was no longer a betrayed wife. I was a woman holding the truth. And I was going to turn that truth into a weapon. The very next morning, I went with Ingrid to the Boston Police Department to file a formal complaint against Lucas. Forging a signature, submitting divorce documents without mutual consent, and knowingly registering a marriage while still legally married? Every charge was serious. The officers took the case seriously once they reviewed the authentic signature scans and compared them to the falsified forms. I didn't forget about the house either, the one Lucas had the nerve to lock me out of. I showed the rental agreement, with my name as the legal tenant, because I had paid most of the deposit up front. Lucas assumed paying the bills gave him the power, but he overlooked the fact that I had signed the lease. By changing the locks without notifying the property manager, and by forcing me out of a legally occupied residence, He might be charged with unlawful eviction and tampering with rental property. But I wasn't stopping there. I knew Lucas couldn't have pulled this off on his own. Someone was helping him. Not just Haley, but possibly an entire team behind the scenes. I wanted hard evidence. I wanted the kind of proof that, when presented in court, would slice through every excuse like a razor. If Lucas dared to argue, I wanted each of his words to cut deeper into the remains of his so-called dignity. So, I hired a private investigation firm in northern Massachusetts. They had a team that specialized in behavioral analysis and uncovering extramarital affairs. The mission was crystal clear. I needed every bit of information on Lucas, Haley, shared assets, and any sign of financial misconduct or asset manipulation before the divorce. 3 days later, I received the first report. Lucas wasn't just cheating with Haley. He had secretly transferred a large amount of money from our joint account into a small company registered under Haley's name, a shell company supposedly selling online home decor items, but in reality it had no actual business operations. It was all legal loophole to hide assets before the divorce. I clenched the file in my hands. For a moment I wanted to smash the coffee mug on the table, but then I calmed myself. I couldn't let emotions derail a plan that was finally gaining traction. I forwarded a copy of the report to Ingrid, and she replied instantly. We have everything we need to request a full asset freeze on Lucas, including accounts in Haley's name. I'll file a motion with the court for a temporary restraining order. The very next day, the order was granted. Lucas had all of his bank accounts frozen, lost access to any property under his name, and was summoned to appear in court within 10 days. Haley was also ordered to appear and explain how she received money without proper business documentation. The game had completely changed. Lucas called me, his voice trembling. Avery, what are you doing? I've lost everything. They froze all my accounts. Haley's company is being investigated too. What do you want from me? I paused for a long moment before answering calmly. I want you to know what betrayal feels like. I want you to feel what it's like to lose control, like I did when you tricked me into signing away a loveless marriage. Lucas started begging, saying we could settle privately, offering to compensate whatever I wanted, even suggesting a 6-figure amount. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. It's not about the money, it's about justice. And I hung up. That night, as I was organizing documents for a meeting with the criminal investigation attorney, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the detective agency. It's Avery. We just discovered Lucas is trying to sell a Rolex watch worth $40,000 through a private deal. It seems he's trying to gather cash to escape the lawsuit. We're monitoring him closely. I smiled faintly. Lucas always saw me as a weak woman, someone raised in poverty who once dreamed of a small family. But he forgot one thing. I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm Avery. And this time, I won't back down. Not long after the asset freeze order was issued, I instructed my lawyer to file a civil lawsuit, but not just against Lucas. Filed a direct claim against Haley, the woman Lucas had married before finalizing his divorce with me. The complaint was sent via certified mail, along with legal documentation proving that Lucas and I were still legally married at the time of their so-called wedding. In the lawsuit, I demanded that Haley pay damages for defamation and emotional distress under Massachusetts civil law for knowingly entering into an unlawful marriage without verifying Lucas's marital status. Attached were invoices for the wedding event, gowns, hotel arrangements, and all related expenses collected by my attorney from vendors and event organizers. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. On the other end was a young woman's trembling voice. Hello, is this Avery? I'm Haley. I didn't say anything. I let the silence speak for itself. I got your complaint. I truly didn't know he wasn't divorced. He told me it was all done, that you were the one holding out and refusing to sign. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone calm. Do you think I'm going to believe that? An educated, professional woman like you didn't bother to check a marriage certificate? Didn't research the legal status of the man you were about to marry? Haley was silent for a long moment, then started crying. I was deceived. I spent all my savings on the wedding. My parents even took out loans to make it grand. Now I don't know how to face them. I'm begging you, please, don't sue me. I didn't feel triumphant at all. On the contrary, I felt bitter. A young woman, probably once believed in sweet words just like I did years ago, was now thrown into the pit of a fake marriage. I'll consider withdrawing the lawsuit if you agree to testify in court, but under one condition. You must disclose everything about the wedding plan, all the lies Lucas told, and how he transferred assets to you. Haley tearfully agreed. A few days later, Lucas called me. This time, his voice held none of its usual arrogance, only fear. Avery, you're making everything a mess. I can explain. Haley, she didn't know anything. You don't have to blow this up. I gave a cold chuckle. This blew up the day you changed the locks, forged my signature, and held a wedding while still legally married to me. Lucas went quiet. I heard him sigh. Then he tried to sound reasonable. Okay, I'll agree to the divorce. Officially. No asset dispute, no countersuit. I just want you to drop the lawsuit against Haley and let this end here. I paused for a few seconds, then replied, No, I'll only agree to divorce if you compensate me for emotional damages, legal costs, and repay every cent you withdrew from our joint account. As for Haley, I'll drop the case if she cooperates as a witness against you. We'll meet at the notary, sign the papers, and everything will be recorded. 3 days later, at Ingrid's law office, Lucas showed up looking pale. Haley came along, holding a thick envelope, her written testimony of the entire truth. When I walked in, Lucas stood up and forced a crooked smile. Avery, I'm sorry. If I'd known you could be this strong. I sat down and opened the documents. You should have known that from the start, but it's fine. Now sign. We signed the official divorce agreement in front of a notary. Lucas agreed to pay a total of $145,000, including $50,000 for emotional damages, $30,000 for legal and investigative fees, and the remainder as repayment for the money he had illegally transferred to Haley. Before leaving, I turned to Haley and said gently, You're still young. Don't ever let anyone control your life with a few sweet words. Haley nodded, her eyes red with tears. As for Lucas, I'll never forget that crushed look on his face. He once thought I was just a poor, quiet, and fragile woman, but he forgot. I'm Avery, and I never let anyone else define my worth. After signing the divorce and settlement agreement at the notary's office, Lucas thought it was all over. He still clung to a bit of pride and turned to me with a mocking tone. You must be thrilled getting money out of me. Makes sense, though. With that pitiful salary of yours, I bet you're ecstatic holding that check for nearly $150,000. I looked him straight in the eyes. Not angry, not sad, just the gaze of someone who knew they'd already won. You think I need your money? Lucas squinted, smirking sarcastically. That's how it's been since day one. I knew it. A girl raised in poverty like you, used to living frugally, must have been dying to marry someone like me to upgrade her life. If it weren't for me, you'd probably still be stuck somewhere as a low-level manager, making maybe $100,000 to $120,000 a year at best. I laughed, a laugh I hadn't allowed myself in years, not because I was happy, but because I finally had the chance to expose his mask without having to keep up appearances. I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and held the screen up to Lucas. A screenshot of the internal payroll system from my company. Below the title, Senior Regional Director, Avery Thompson, was a number he couldn't possibly misread. $8,750 per month, not including quarterly bonuses and dividends. Lucas froze. I took back the phone and enunciated clearly. You're right, I did grow up poor, and that's exactly why I've never wanted to depend on any man, including you. While you were calling me a leech, I was the North American regional director of a multinational corporation, managing budgets worth hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Lucas swallowed hard, eyes glued to the floor. I continued, voice steady and cold. What do you think I did with that salary? I didn't need designer bags or flashy cars. I saved, I invested, I bought real estate under my own name. And the law is very clear. Assets acquired before marriage, or not jointly titled, are considered separate property. Lucas's voice trembled. So you lied to me. I shook my head. No. You never asked. You were too busy with your own ego to see who I really was. I didn't hide, I just didn't brag. Because to me, real love isn't measured by a bank account. But you're the opposite. I stood up, getting ready to leave, but left him with one last line. I don't need your forgiveness. And I won't withdraw the criminal charges. You forged documents. You broke the law. And I want you to learn how to take responsibility. That evening, I sat in my new apartment in downtown Boston, watching the city lights through the large glass windows. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel bitter. There was only a strange peace. Something I had longed for throughout those years living inside the shell of what we called marriage. My phone buzzed again, a message from my lawyer, Ingrid. The court has accepted the criminal case. Statement appointment at the police station scheduled for next weekend. I'll be there with you. I set the phone down, poured a glass of red wine. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with rage, but with calm persistence and undeniable proof. I had loved Lucas once, but I loved myself more. And that was what saved me from the darkness. I looked into the night. The distant city lights flickered like tiny sparks of hope. My life didn't end with a divorce. It had only just begun, on terms I fully controlled. After the criminal case was launched, I had almost no contact with Lucas, but news about him kept landing on Ingrid's desk and on social media. Just 2 weeks after our divorce was finalized, the real estate investment firm where Lucas worked, a well-known group in the New England area, issued an internal notice. Lucas Bennett is temporarily suspended due to involvement in legal document forgery and unlawful marriage registration. The memo didn't mention the incident by name, but everyone in the industry knew. The career Lucas had bragged about for years, the cocktail parties with elites, the contract signings at luxury resorts, collapsed like a soap bubble. A few days later, I heard he was terminated permanently. Partners pulled out, the company's reputation took a severe hit from the personal scandal of one of its senior executives. I didn't feel smug, but I did feel that justice was truly at work. A man like Lucas, who once thought himself above all moral standards, now had to bow before the truth. But that was only the beginning of his downfall. Haley, after submitting her full testimony on Lucas's relationship and finances, filed a lawsuit for personal damages and defamation. Her grounds: deception, reputational harm, and emotional distress from the sham marriage. Her family demanded repayment for the entire wedding, outfits, venue deposits, and even psychological therapy after the trauma. Total, nearly $90,000. Add that to the $145,000 in compensation I had forced him to sign off on, and Lucas found himself in financial ruin. His accounts were frozen, his credit cards suspended. The only property under his name was seized by the bank for unpaid loans. During one meeting with Ingrid, she said quietly, "Your ex-husband just filed a request to defer his financial obligations. Reason: no steady income." I raised an eyebrow. He's unemployed. Worse, no stable residence, and the latest update: he moved back in with his parents in rural Western Connecticut. A week later, a former classmate sent me a photo she took from her car. In the picture, Lucas wore a reflective safety vest, standing under the sun at a construction site, hauling bags of cement. I couldn't believe my eyes. The same Lucas who once mocked me for living like the poor was now doing manual labor at a small construction firm run by his uncle on his mother's side. And what stunned me more, every day, his parents gave him exactly $5 for food, the rest of his wages being deducted straight toward his debt, to pay both me and Haley. The man who thought he was above the law now lived in a makeshift wooden room behind the house. No electricity, no internet, no air conditioning. Up by 5 a.m. to do labor work, eating cold rice and hard-boiled eggs for dinner, the very things he once sneered at when I talked about my childhood. Do I pity him? Honestly, yes. But I don't regret a thing. Everyone is allowed to make mistakes. But Lucas chose wrong again and again. From how he treated me to forging legal documents and deceiving multiple people for his own gain. And now, the price isn't theoretical. It's a reality he lives every single day. I saw Lucas's parents once more when they requested a meeting to apologize on his behalf and asked for a more flexible repayment schedule. Mrs. Bennett, who once looked down on me when I entered their family, now sat in silence with tears in her eyes. You were a better daughter-in-law than we ever realized. We were wrong. But Lucas, he needs to learn until he truly understands that. I nodded. No anger, no blame. Because I knew a man like Lucas would only learn through bitter failure. As for me, I had closed a chapter filled with pain, and I was ready to write an entirely new one for myself. I used to think my life would always revolve around perfect plans, packed meeting calendars, and million-dollar contracts. But after everything with Lucas, the broken marriage, the lawsuit, the insults I had to swallow, I realized what I needed wasn't a plan. It was a beginning. So when my company offered me a transfer to our global headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland, to serve as executive vice president, I didn't hesitate. I resigned from my old role, reorganized my assets, sold my Boston apartment, and flew to Europe with just one suitcase, a laptop, and a heart finally stitched back together. Life in Zurich was nothing like what I was used to. No more noise, no more pressure to prove myself in every meeting. Here I learned to slow down, to sip coffee on the balcony instead of gulping it in the elevator. I learned to believe that I had the right to start over, not for anyone else, but for myself. During an internal strategy meeting, I was seated next to Matthias Keller, a senior director for the European division, German-Swiss, 42 years old. His blue eyes were as calm as a winter lake, and his words were humble and measured. Almost hard to believe he led hundreds of employees across 3 countries. We didn't start with flirting. We started with small questions. What do you think about the Asian market strategy? I noticed you always carry that old leather notebook. Old school note-taking? Gradually, our work conversations turned into late dinners after meetings, then long walks around Lake Zurich in the snow. Matthias wasn't like any man I had known. He never asked how much I earned. He wasn't curious about why I had divorced. When I finally told him everything about Lucas, the trial, the sleepless nights, Matthias simply held my hand and said, "I don't care about what you've lost. I care about what we'll build together." And then one day, when I started to feel something different in my body, I went to the doctor. I was pregnant. I didn't panic. I wasn't afraid. When I told Matthias, he didn't freeze like Lucas once had. Instead, he held me for a long time and whispered, "You don't have to carry this alone. We'll be parents, together." Matthias later offered to take 6 months off work after I gave birth to care for the baby, so I could fully recover and return to my role. A senior executive, willing to take full-time paternity leave just so I could rest and be a mom in the gentlest way possible. I had never dared to dream of a life like that, because for so long I'd been trained to tough it out, to stand on my own. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. 3 months later, on a snowy night, Matthias knelt down in the middle of Münsterhof Square, where Christmas lights shimmered in his warm eyes, and said in flawless English, "Avery Thompson, will you write the next chapter with me, not as co-workers, but as life partners?" I nodded, tears falling as my heart grew light. The woman once kicked out of her own house by her legal husband, the one labeled a gold digger, the one who had to prove her worth in court, to society, and to the very man who betrayed her. Now I no longer had to prove anything. I just had to live, with the child growing inside me and a partner who saw value in who I was, not what I had. My new life isn't perfect, but it's real. And to me, that's enough. If you're listening to this story and see yourself somewhere in my journey, remember this: women were not born to suffer in silence. I used to think keeping the peace by staying quiet was a noble form of sacrifice. I tried so hard to be the ideal wife, to stay silent through the neglect, to clean up both the mess and the pain, just hoping the person beside me would finally see I deserve to be loved. But in the end, I realized silence doesn't make people love you more. It just makes them disrespect you longer. Marriage is supposed to be a shared journey. If it becomes a burden carried by only one person, that's not love. It's emotional suffocation. And when injustice, coldness, and betrayal fill up your heart, divorce isn't failure. Divorce is the brave choice of someone willing to walk away from what's wrong. I didn't leave my marriage to run away. I left it to reclaim my voice. And only when I dared to speak, to stand up for myself, did I rediscover my true worth. Not through a man's eyes, but through my own. The day I walked out of that notary office, I wasn't a woman who failed at love. I was a survivor and a victor. The day I started over in a foreign country, I wasn't an abandoned woman anymore. I was a mother, a leader, and a woman who knew exactly what she deserved. Real happiness doesn't come from someone else's perfection. It comes from the love you give yourself. When you dare to love yourself, the world stops twisting you into old molds, and one day, happiness will find you, not because you begged for it, but because you finally believed you were worthy of it. I'm Avery, and if there's one thing I want to leave behind with this story, it's this. Live as if you are the only one responsible for your own happiness, because the truth is, you are. Avery's story isn't just a journey away from a toxic marriage, it's proof that modern women can rise from heartbreak, rebuild stronger, and live fully in their own truth. In real life, many women choose silence for the sake of stability. But the truth is, real peace only comes when you let go of what doesn't serve you and have the courage to live for yourself. Happiness doesn't come from dependency, it lives within you. What do you think about Avery's journey? Did she choose the right path for herself? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about life, love, and family.